There are moments in life that don't feel big at first. They're quiet, subtle, and easy to overlook. But something about them lingers just enough to make you pause. Maybe it's a thought that keeps coming back, a feeling you can't quite explain, or a question that shows up when you least expect it. At first, you move past it. You carry on like you always do, but over time, you start to notice it more and more. You start to lean into it, and without realizing it, that small moment of curiosity becomes the beginning of something bigger. A shift of sorts, a new way of seeing things, a new way of understanding yourself and the world around you. And that's the space we're stepping into today. Before we move any further into today's reflection, let's take a moment to slow down together. So get comfortable wherever you are, soften your shoulders, and take a breath with me. Take a slow breath in. And gently let it out. Wherever you are, allow yourself to arrive and walk gently into this space with me. Welcome to Find Your Way to Vibe. Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Find Your Way to Vibe. I'm Amber, and I'm really grateful you're here with me today. Today's episode is about curiosity, but not just curiosity in the sense of learning something new. It's about the kind of curiosity that quietly pulls you in, the kind that leads you somewhere you didn't even realize you needed to go. For me, that started during a time in my life where I was just trying to figure things out and rediscover who I was. I was in therapy at the time, going to group meetings that were suggested to me, showing up for myself and doing the work. Even when I didn't fully understand what that meant at the moment, I just kept showing up and doing it. And I remember the last meeting with my therapist very clearly because this was the day that we agreed that I really didn't need his guidance any longer. I just felt strong enough to be able to continue moving down my path without the therapy. So we agreed, and he just gave me the advice of continuing to stay the course, keep going to group, and doing the things that worked for me. And I didn't have to continue the things that weren't working for me, just focus on the things that were working for me. And that if I ever needed to come back, he would be there. Like it often does, life shifted, insurance changed, and I didn't go back. But I did stay the course. I stayed focused on my healing and my progress. And somewhere in that process, something began to open in me, and my curiosity began to expand, especially when it came to healing and self-help and mental health. And one of those things that really pulled me in during that time was literature. I was given a lot of guidance with literature and was introduced to a lot of different books that I never heard of. So most of the time when I heard of these books, it was during my meetings that I went to. And I would take a notebook with me always because I knew that I would get some form of wisdom from my attendance in this room. So every time I heard a book that interested me or that had assisted somebody else on their journey or that was laying out in front of me on the table that were provided to us, I would write it down, along with any other pieces of wisdom that came out of the conversations within that room. So I just wrote it all down and I couldn't get enough. I really enjoyed going because I learned a lot and it helped shift my perspective into a different way of thinking about healing and a different way about approaching life. And I'm really glad that I did take all of that from it because it really elevated my curiosity of it all. That's where it started. And I noticed that once I started to absorb the material, read the material, and take it in, my mind started to shift in a different direction. Even if it was just a small shift, it was enough. And naturally, I wanted more. I wanted more of what was helping me and helping me to come to a different understanding or shift my perspective. I did go back to the ideas that I was already aware of and revisited them to a point where I tried to understand them at a different level. And then I started to explore the ones that were introduced to me, all the new concepts, all the new books, all the different thoughts, nuggets of wisdom, etc. I just really tried to pull in what I could. And before I even realized it, my mind was working on overdrive. And just like that, I was down that rabbit hole of curiosity because it was a domino effect. Just one book led to another, that led to another, that led to another. And looking back now, I realized that the seed had been planted long before. One book that was mentioned often was The Seed of the Soul, which is one I was already familiar with, even though I didn't fully understand its impact at that time. It was given to me when I was 18 by someone who just met me, but somehow still saw me. And he has remained a constant in my life ever since. And I'm so grateful for that because he has been a huge teacher in my life in ways that I didn't fully recognize back then, but so grateful I see today. And that book is what started it all, even though I didn't realize that it would be at the time. It definitely started my mind on this path forward. But where things really began to open up for me during this journey was with a book called The Treasury of Light. This book felt different. It wasn't something I read straight through. It was something I would pick up, read a few pages, and then sit with it. There were so many insights woven throughout by different influential people. There was reflections of energy, awareness, the way we think, the way we move. And what stood out the most to me was how it kept bringing me back to the idea that there's more going on beneath the surface than we usually pay attention to. It wasn't telling me what to believe. It was opening the door to think differently, to question the things I hadn't questioned before, and to notice things I hadn't really been aware of. That's where the curiosity really started to grow, because instead of just reading it and moving on, I found myself reflecting, sitting with it, and coming back to it at different times and seeing something new each time. And that's what I think is really interesting about this kind of work. It's not always about getting one clear answer. Sometimes it's about just collecting little pieces of awareness along the way. Before we move along, I wanted to share with you the passage that hooked me to the Treasury of Light and helped me to shift my mind in a new direction. And that passage is called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise. In the infinity of life where I am, All is perfect, whole, and complete. And yet life is ever changing. There is no beginning and no end, only a constant cycling and recycling of substance and experiences. Life is never stuck or static or stale, for each moment is ever new and fresh. I am one with the very power that created me, and this power has given me the power to create my own circumstances. I rejoice in the knowledge that I have the power of my own mind to use in any way I choose. Every moment of life is a new beginning point as we move from the old. This moment is a new point of beginning for me, right here and right now. All is well in my world. So that is a passage that hooked me and got me to read even more. And so I hold this book very close to me, and I revisit it when I need reminders. And from there, down the rabbit hole of self-healing, I went. I was curious about alternative ways to help me process the things that kept me stuck, the feelings I wasn't able to push past. I was tired of repeating the same patterns, tired of making the same errors in judgment, whether it was a lack of confidence or something deeper that I hadn't uncovered yet. And this journey, it has been eye-opening for me. It hasn't been easy. There has been a lot of time spent with myself processing, a lot of tears, a lot of days that left me feeling numb. And there were moments where I hit walls, where I wanted to say, you know what, I'm done. I just don't want to go down the path of figuring it all out because it's too much. There's too much information. There's too many people telling me this and that in whatever way. But for some reason, I couldn't walk away from it. Even through things that shook me in ways I never expected, I just kept going. And if anything, those experiences gave me an even deeper perspective. And I also learned the lesson of take what you like and leave the rest, because not everything that you explore or read or listen to is something that you need to hang on to. I've learned to really evaluate what was working for me and what didn't work for me, what made sense to me and what didn't. I just focused on the things that really resonated with me rather than taking it all in. If something didn't quite hit the right way, I just moved past it, and I would focus on the things that did work for me. I would highlight things in books that spoke to me, or I'd write them down in my journal or on a sticky note, and that's what I would carry forward with me, because you really don't have to take everything in. You just take what you like and leave the rest. It's that simple, and I'm so grateful for that lesson along the way, because otherwise I would be swimming in even more books and even more paper than I already am with it all. So it's been quite the fun little discovery of learning. From there, my journey led me into the work of Wayne Dyer. And the book that really opened the door for me was Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. This was actually gifted to me during a time in my life when I really needed it. Even if I didn't fully realize it at the time, I would come back to it much later for it to land in a completely different way. Because at this point in my life, when I rediscovered it, things began to shift for me. Not just in what I was learning, but in how I was starting to see myself. What I really found interesting about this book is that it is rooted in the teachings of the Tao Te Ching, which is a collection of ancient wisdom centered around balance, awareness, and living in alignment. And the way that Wayne brought that into something more modern and relatable, it made those ideas feel accessible in a way that I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't really overwhelming, it was more grounding. And of course, that naturally led me inward. Up until that point, I hadn't really stopped to question my thoughts in a deeper way. And when I finally did, I started noticing how automatic they were. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same quiet narratives running in the background of my mind. And instead of just accepting every thought as truth, I started to question them. I started to ask, is this thought helping me? Is it true? Is there another way I could see this? And again, this is where curiosity shows up. Because instead of just accepting every thought as a fact, you begin to explore them. You start to realize that you have more influence over your inner world than you might have believed. And even small shifts, small reframes of your mind can begin to change how you move through your day. It doesn't mean everything suddenly becomes perfect, but it does mean you're no longer completely on autopilot. You're choosing moment by moment how you want to think, how you want to feel, and how you want to show up. Over time, those small shifts start to create something bigger. And as that awareness began to deepen within me, I found myself naturally drawn further into his work because it just felt like a continuation, like each layer was building on the last. And that's what led me to Wishes Fulfilled. Wishes Fulfilled is a book that expanded that perspective even more for me, because instead of focusing on changing your thoughts, it begins to shift you into becoming. It moves away from chasing what you want and brings you into the feeling of already being with it. Instead of saying, I want peace, you begin to ask, what would it feel like to be at peace right now? And then you practice that. It becomes less about reaching for something outside of you and more about aligning with something within you. And this is where the words I am began to take on a deeper meaning for me. Because whatever comes after I am, we tend to identify with. So if we're constantly saying things like, I am stressed, I am overwhelmed, I am stuck, we essentially reinforce that as part of who we are. And when you begin to shift that thought process, even gently, and begin to say things more along the lines of, I am calm, I am open, I am learning, I am becoming, it starts to change the way you see yourself. And not in some forced way, but in a way that just creates space. And something else that really stayed with me from this book was the idea of imagination. Not as something that is unrealistic, but just something that's more meaningful. Like, what if things you're imagining aren't random? What if they're showing you what's possible for you? And again, that curiosity shows up. Because instead of shutting those thoughts down, you begin to explore them. You ask, does this resonate with me? And why does it feel so meaningful? And over time, again, something shifts. And instead of trying to control everything, you begin to trust. Trust that when your thoughts, your energy, and your actions begin to align, things will start to unfold differently. And I think that's the real shift here. Going from wishing for a life to becoming someone who is already living it. And as I sat with that idea, the power of I am, I found myself becoming even more aware of how we define ourselves without realizing it. Not just in passing thoughts, but in the way we speak about who we are. And that curiosity, that awareness naturally led me a little deeper. And this time it led me to the I am discourses. Another path that helped shift my perspective, because this perspective felt a little different. The I Am Discourses by Godfrey Ray King felt a little different because it speaks about I am as something powerful, almost like a direct connection to the source of who we are. The idea is that I am isn't just a phrase we use casually. It's a creative force. It's the part of us that declares, defines, and gives life to what we believe about ourselves. So whatever follows I am, we begin to energize. We begin to embody it. And when I really started paying attention to that, I became more aware how often I would speak about myself in a way that kept me feeling stuck. I would say things like, I am tired, I am overwhelmed, I'm not where I should be. And again, it's not about pretending those feelings don't exist, but it's about recognizing how powerful it is to be intentional with what we attach to I am. Because from this perspective, those words aren't just descriptions, they are declarations. And when you start to shift that, even just a little, into things more like, I am learning, I am open, I am becoming, I am love, I am joy, you begin to create something different. And what I found really interesting is how this connects with everything else, with awareness, with presence, with curiosity, because it brings you back to this idea that we're not fixed. We're not just one version of ourselves. We're constantly evolving and redefining and becoming in every moment. And when we become aware of that, we can start to choose words a little more carefully. Not out of pressure to do so, but just out of the possibility. And as I became more aware of how I was defining myself through the words I was using, through the way that I was thinking, another question began to surface. Not just what am I telling myself I am, but who is the one noticing it? Because if I can observe the thoughts, if I can hear the words I'm attaching to myself, then maybe I'm not those things at all. And that curiosity, that quiet shift in my awareness is what led me into the power of now. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is a simple idea, but incredibly powerful, in my opinion. Because so much of our stress, anxiety, and overthinking comes from being pulled out of the present moment. We replay things that have already happened, or we try to control things that haven't even happened yet. And somewhere in the middle of that, we lose touch with the moment we're actually in. What this book showed me is that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness behind them. And when you begin to observe your thoughts instead of getting pulled into every single one of them, something changes. There's more space, more steadiness, and a little more calm. And even when the thoughts don't disappear, they don't hold the same weight as they once did. It also introduces the idea of the pain body, emotional energy from past experiences that can get triggered without even realizing it. This is something that I'm very familiar with. And when we're not aware of it, we act from it. And it's almost automatic. But when you begin to practice presence, you start to catch those moments. And again, this is where curiosity shows up. Instead of judging what you're feeling, you begin to ask, why is this coming up right now? What am I holding on to? And what is this trying to show me? That shift from reacting to observing changes everything, in my opinion. Because when you come back to the present moment, even just for a few seconds, there's something grounding there. It's a quiet reminder that right now, in this moment, you're okay. And for me, this has helped so much with anxiety. Learning to bring my focus back to what's right in front of me instead of getting pulled into what was or what might be. And of course, I still get carried away sometimes, but now I notice it sooner and I come back to this moment right now. I even had a watch at one point that didn't have time or a watch face as usual. All it said was now. And I would wear that almost every single day. I wish I still had it because I would put it on right now because I feel like it's just an important reminder. So, yeah, that reminder was essential for me back then when I was wearing it because I needed to remind myself that we're in this moment right now. There's nothing else but now. And that helped me to remain in that practice of focusing on the present and not the past or the future, and coming back to this moment again and again. And as I started to live it more, coming back to the present moment, observing my thoughts instead of being pulled into them, something else began to open. It wasn't just about noticing my thoughts anymore. It was about questioning my relationship with them. Because once you realize you're not your thoughts, you start to wonder, then who is the one noticing them? That curiosity, that awareness in the moment is what led me to another book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. The Untethered Soul will be the final book that I touch on today. And this one really stayed with me because in a lot of ways, it brought everything together. Because whereas some of the other work helped me to understand my thoughts, this one helped me to better understand my relationship to them. And it goes deeper into the inner voice we all have, the constant narrator in our mind, the one that likes to comment on everything and replay the conversations and questions the decisions that we make and tries to make sense of what we're feeling. And what the book helped me realize is that just because the voice is there doesn't mean it's me. It's just something that I'm simply aware of. And when you start to see that, even just a little, I feel like it creates a space between you and your thoughts, and a space between you and your reactions. And in that space, you begin to recognize that you don't have to follow every thought or believe every story or react to every emotion that comes up, even. It also talks about how we tend to close ourselves off over time, especially when we've been hurt. We build these layers of protection without even realizing it. And while that might feel safe, it also keeps from fully experiencing life, from feeling more deeply and being open to allowing things to move through us the way they're meant to. And one of the biggest takeaways for me was learning to stay open, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it would be easier to just shut down instead of resisting, controlling, or pushing things away. You allow. You let the experience move through you without gripping onto it and without trying to block it. And that's where I feel something really begins to change within us, because when you stay open, you start to experience life differently. You're not just reacting anymore, you're observing, you're learning and growing. And over time, that to me creates a sense of freedom. Not because everything becomes easy all of a sudden, but because you're no longer holding on to everything that you think or everything that happens so tightly that you can't let go and move forward. And when I look back at all of this, everything I've explored, everything I've learned, what stands out the most isn't just the books themselves, it's the people behind them, the minds and the perspectives, and the willingness they had to explore something much deeper and then share it with others. Because every single one of these authors met me at a moment where I was searching for something, even if I didn't fully realize what I was searching for yet. They didn't hand me any answers. They didn't tell me who to be, but they offered something just as meaningful. They offered a different perspective. They asked questions that I hadn't thought to ask myself. They challenged ways of thinking that I didn't even realize I had been holding on to. And they opened doors in ways that allowed me to walk through at my own pace. And that's something I've really come to appreciate about this kind of journey. The right words, the right message, the right insight, they tend to find you when you're ready for them. And it's not all at once, not in a way to overwhelm you. It's just piece by piece and layer by layer, almost like little lights along the path. And that's the way I see it now, like a trail of gratitude. Each book, each author, each moment of awareness is a light along the way, guiding but not forcing, inviting but not demanding, and helping you see just a little bit further ahead than you could before. And sometimes that's all you need. Not the whole path laid out in front of you, just enough light to take the next step, and then the next, and then the next. And when I sit with everything we've talked about today, what I keep coming back to is how quietly powerful curiosity is. It doesn't push or demand. It doesn't need you to have everything figured out. It just asks you to stay open, to be willing to explore and question, to look at things from a different angle, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. Because that's where the shifts begin. Not in having all the answers, but in being willing to ask those questions. Not knowing exactly where you're going, but in trusting yourself enough to take the next step anyway. And when you allow yourself to follow that curiosity, to lean into it, even just a little bit, you start to realize something. That everything you've been searching for, every answer, every shift of mindset, every piece of understanding has been guiding you somewhere all along. And sometimes it's not about finding something new. It's simply about remembering. Sometimes all you need is a little bit of curiosity, a willingness to explore and to question and to stay open to what might unfold, because you never know where it might lead you. And sometimes it leads you right back to yourself. As always, thank you again for walking with me today on this journey. I really enjoyed revisiting my rabbit hole of curiosity with all the literature that I introduced to you. I hope that this has piqued your curiosity to go down your own rabbit hole. Until next time, walk slowly, breathe deeply, and remember, you can always find your way to vibe.